We finally managed to finish the time machine. After so many years of research, it is finally ready. The metallic sheen of the gears and the complex cables connected to the control panel seem almost unreal, a dream come true. Herbert told me we should test it, and I volunteered. I know there are risks of going wrong. Uncertainty hangs over us like a shadow, but for science, I am willing to do anything. This invention will change everything, opening doors to possibilities that previously existed only in fiction. As I put on my safety helmet and adjust the controls, I feel a mixture of fear and excitement. I look at Herbert, who watches me with a serious expression, but there is a gleam of hope in his eyes. He trusts me and our creation. "What date did you choose?" Herbert asks, his voice heavy with expectation. "I want to go 50 years in the future," I answer firmly. The idea of seeing what our work could achieve in that time fills me with curiosity and determination. "All right, adjusting for 50 years ahead," he says, fiddling with the controls with precision. "You ready?" "Ready," I answer firmly, although my heart is racing. Remember to store your helmet well. You will need it to get back. I take one last look at our lab. The walls full of graphs, notes, and equations that guided us here. I press the controls and feel the machine vibrate slightly under me. An increasing hum fills the room as power is directed to the central device. Suddenly, everything around me begins to distort. The colors mix and the sound becomes muffled. I feel intense pressure, as if I'm being pulled in all directions at once. I take a deep breath and keep my focus. "For science," I repeat to myself. Then a burst of light. When I open my eyes, I'm in a completely different place. The scenery around me is futuristic and stunning. Tall, slender buildings rise towards the sky, made of translucent materials that impressively reflect sunlight. The streets are filled with floating vehicles, silent and fast, which move with an almost choreographed elegance. Technology is everywhere. Holographic screens display information and entertainment, while small, agile drones fly around, performing various tasks. People around me wear clothes that look like something out of a science fiction movie, with fabrics that change color and shape as they move. "Wow," I murmur, amazed. Every detail is vivid, real. I take a few steps, still trying to assimilate what happened. Adrenaline still runs in my veins, but the feeling of accomplishment is indescribable. I feel the gentle wind against my face and the fresh smell of carefully maintained greenery. Every corner seems to reveal a new technological wonder, a glimpse of what humanity has managed to achieve. I whisper to myself, a smile forming on my lips. I knew there were risks, but in that moment, the thrill of accomplishing the impossible outweighs any fear. The journey has just begun, and I can't wait to find out what the future, now the present, holds. Technology is everywhere. Holographic screens display information and entertainment, while small, agile drones fly around, performing various tasks. People around me wear clothes that look like something out of a science fiction movie, with fabrics that change color and shape as they move. I put the helmet in the backpack I brought and started walking through the enchanted streets. Some people walked past me in such different costumes that I even feel a little out of place in that setting. I decided to enter some buildings and explore the place more. In one of the buildings, I meet a gentleman. He seems busy, but there is something in him that conveys me sympathy. I approach and, with a hesitant smile, ask, "Excuse me, sir, can you tell me what time it is and what day it is today?" He looks at me with a mixture of curiosity and kindness before answering. "It's January 2074, and now it's 3 o'clock in the afternoon." I give a small smile, feeling a wave of realization wash over me. It really worked very well. "Thank you," I say, trying to hide my excitement. I continue my exploration, each step filling me with more admiration for what I see. I continue my exploration, each step filling me with more admiration for what I see. I was curious to understand more about humanity, about our current problems, about everything that has happened in the last 50 years. But I didn't want to sound crazy, so I had to do it with caution. I find a man sitting on a bench in the street, watching the floating vehicles go by. He seems serene, maybe even a little lost in his own thoughts. I decided to sit next to him and make conversation. "Hello," I say, trying to sound casual. Nice day, huh? He turns to me, a little surprised, but smiles. Yes, it is a very pleasant day, he replies. Are you new around here? I smile back, relieved by the openness. Yes, I'm visiting. I haven't been to this part of town in a while. I'm trying to update myself on the changes. He nods, seeming to understand. A lot has changed in recent years. Technological innovations, advances in medicine, even the way we communicate. I imagine, I answer, my eyes shining with curiosity. Could you tell me more about how things are today? I am especially interested in how the problems of the past have been solved, if at all. He laughs, a warm, friendly sound. Well, that might take a while, but I would love to share what I know. Where do you want to start? And so, we begin a deep and revealing conversation about the state of the world in 2074. His every word fills me with fascination and gives me a new perspective on the impact of time and change on society. I hesitate for a moment, choosing my words carefully. Tell me about the 2030s and 2040s. What happened that was so significant? He sighs and his eyes take on a distant glow, as if reliving memories. The 2030s were a turbulent period. We face a number of global crises, both environmental and social. Everything reached a critical point, and we had to take drastic measures to save the planet. Conflicts arose due to resource shortages and growing inequalities. I absorb every word, feeling the weight of the story. But, oddly enough, these difficulties eventually united humanity. We realized we needed to work together to survive. After many sacrifices and the loss of many lives, we managed to get around the situation. Sustainable technologies have become the norm, and fairer policies have been implemented. And the AI technologies that were emerging helped a lot in all this. He pauses, watching my expression before continuing. It was a critical moment. If we had not acted urgently, we would not be here today. I look at him, trying to imagine the extent of what he is describing. It's hard to process everything, but at the same time, I'm fascinated. He smiles, a sad and at the same time hopeful smile. Unfortunately, many died, but what came out of this crisis was a humanity that was more united and aware of its responsibilities. He then looks me straight in the eye and asks, "But why do you want to know this kind of thing?" I am surprised by the direct question. I smile shyly and answer, "I like to hear people talk about these issues. I like to see the opinions." He laughs again, but this time, there's a comforting gentleness to his laughter. "Well, you seem to be in the right place for this. This is a time of learning and growth, and I am sure you will find many fascinating stories around here." We kept talking, his every word giving me a new perspective on the impact of time and change on society. In a way, watching him speak, I began to feel mildly attracted to that man. Because of this, I thought it best to end that conversation. "Well, it was great talking to you, but I need to continue exploring," I say, chatting to my searches. Trying not to sound rushed. He looks at me with a twinkle in his eye, and before I get up, he takes out a small device from his pocket. "Here's my contact. If you want to continue our conversation or have other questions, please feel free to reach out to me." I blush slightly and pick up the device. "Thank you. I'll do that. It was a pleasure talking to you." He smiles again, a smile that seems to understand more than I was willing to reveal. "My pleasure. Have a great day." After approaching a few more people in that place, I decided it was time to return to the present. I activated the helmet with some trepidation, not knowing if it would really work. The feeling of nervousness was almost paralyzing, but I had to trust our invention. Fortunately, in the blink of an eye, I returned to the present. The familiarity of the lab brought me immediate relief. Herbert and the team ran up to me, expressions eager and full of expectation. "How was it?" Herbert asked, his voice overflowing with curiosity. Smiling broadly, I gave the news enthusiastically. "It was amazing. It worked perfectly," I declared, feeling the excitement run through my body. I met people, explored the environment, and collected a lot of information. I immediately handed over the reports I had prepared during my brief stay in the future. Everyone huddled around the documents, eager to examine the details. The joy and pride on their faces were evident. "This will change everything," Herbert muttered, more to himself than to others. As I watched the team dive into the data, I felt a deep sense of accomplishment, not only for the successful journey, but also for the hope and possibility we had created. Science, once again, had proven its transformative power. That night, I could barely sleep due to all that experience. The adrenaline rush of time travel and the excitement of my colleagues still reverberated in my mind. But there was something else that kept me awake. The man I met in the future wouldn't get out of my head. I turned over in bed, remembering every detail of our conversation. His words, his smile, and the way he looked at me made me uneasy. There was an unexpected and inexplicable connection, something I couldn't ignore. I closed my eyes, trying to push these thoughts away, but the image of him persisted. He wouldn't get out of my head, and in a way, I didn't want him to. The next day, I returned to the lab ready for more time travel. Excitement and determination drove me. This time we would go again 50 years in the future to collect new information. Herbert and the team were already on site, adjusting the equipment and checking every detail. There was an energy in the air, a mixture of anxiety and excitement. "All set?" I asked, approaching Herbert. He nodded, smiling. "Yeah, we're ready. Let's do it again." I put the helmet on more confidently this time. The familiar feeling of vibration and distortion began, and soon I was transported back to the future. When my eyes adjusted to the brightness of the environment, I realized that I was again in that fascinating and futuristic place. The streets were as busy as before, but this time, I had a clear purpose. I walked the streets, observing and interacting with people, collecting information and taking detailed notes. I felt more at ease, more connected to that time. And as I explored, a part of me hoped to meet him again, the man who impacted me so much. But first, I focused on the mission, determined to make this trip as successful as the one before. I continued the research, approaching people and documenting everything I could about everything there. The afternoon was still mild, without so much news. The interactions were informative, but nothing that stood out. It was then that, crossing a corner, I met the same man as the day before. My heart jumped, and a spontaneous smile appeared on my face. Blushing slightly, I realized that he recognized me too. "Hello, researcher," he said with a friendly smile. "Still want to know more opinions?" He smiles, trying to keep his composure. "Yes, always," I replied, feeling a mixture of nervousness and joy. "It's great to meet you again." He invited me to sit on a nearby bench, and soon we were immersed in another conversation. This time, he told me more about the social and technological advances that have shaped the world in recent decades. He spoke about changes in global policies, the evolution of education, and new forms of community coexistence. "Humanity has gone through many trials, but we have learned to adapt and evolve together," he said, with a reflective tone. I listened intently, mentally recording every detail, but I also let myself be enveloped by his presence. There was something captivating about the way he spoke, a passion that resonated with me. "And you?" he asked suddenly. "What brought you here besides the research?" I was surprised by the question, but I felt a sincerity in his eyes that made me want to answer honestly. Curiosity and the desire to understand people better. Know how our actions today can impact tomorrow. Well, maybe a little hope to find answers to questions that I still cannot fully formulate. He smiled, understanding. "I think that's a noble reason. The search for knowledge always takes us to unexpected places." He invited me to a coffee shop, and I accepted. After all, that would surely make my research even more palpable. We walked together through the futuristic streets until we reached the location. The cafeteria was a spectacle of automation. There were no people working. Everything was mechanical. Elegantly designed robots served the drinks, while drones delivered the orders directly to the tables. Decor was minimalist, with glossy surfaces and huge windows that let in natural light. We sat at a table near the window, from where we could observe the movement outside. A robot approached to pick up our orders. I chose a drink that he recommended, something exotic that I had never heard of, but which he guaranteed to be delicious. While we were waiting for our orders, I decided to ask more about him. "So what's your job?" I asked, curious to know more about her life. He smiled, leaning forward slightly. "I'm an intelligent ecosystem engineer," he said, with a twinkle in his eye. I was intrigued. What exactly does an intelligent ecosystem engineer do? Well, my job involves creating and maintaining natural environments that are integrated with advanced technology. We use artificial intelligence to monitor and adjust ecosystems in real time, ensuring that flora and fauna coexist harmoniously and sustainably. For example, we can predict and mitigate natural disasters, optimize agricultural production without harming the environment, and even restore areas devastated by pollution or climate change. I listened fascinated as he explained. It was an incredible concept, something that seemed so far away in my time, but here it was a reality. "That's amazing," she said, genuinely impressed. "It must be a very rewarding job." Yes, he agreed. "Knowing that I am helping to create a more sustainable and balanced future is extremely rewarding. What about you? What brought you to this town?" I smiled, remembering the initial purpose of my trip: curiosity and the desire to better understand how things work here. Know how today's actions can impact tomorrow. Well, maybe a little hope to find answers to questions that I still cannot fully formulate. He nodded, seeming to understand perfectly. The search for knowledge always takes us to unexpected places, and sometimes we find more than we were looking for. Our orders arrived, delivered accurately by a drone. I grabbed my drink, mentally thanking him for the amazing day I was having. We talked more about his work and my research, and more I felt a special connection with him. In a way, watching him speak made me feel even more attracted to that man. So I thought it best to end this conversation. "Well, it was great talking to you again, but I need to keep exploring," she said, trying not to sound rushed. He looked at me with a twinkle in his eye and said, "If you want to continue our conversation or have other questions, please feel free to reach out to me." "Thank you. I'll do that. It was a pleasure talking to you." He smiled again, a smile that seemed to understand more than I was willing to reveal. "My pleasure. Have a great day." After this interaction, I continued my research with renewed energy. I approached a few more people and collected more data. When the day began to darken, I decided it was time to return to the present. I activated the helmet and returned to the present, and everyone soon asked me, "How was it?" Very happy, I gave them the news and delivered reports about it. That night, I could barely sleep again due to all that experience. And in a way, for that man I had known, he wouldn't get out of my head. The next day, I returned to the lab ready for more time travel, determined to explore the future further and perhaps find it again. Those trips continued for another week, and more I felt attracted to that man. Each encounter brought us closer, and I knew that soon I would have to tell the truth. It was on the 5th day, while we were walking together through a futuristic park, that I decided to confess. "I need to tell you something," I began, hesitating for a moment before continuing. "What I'm doing here is not ordinary research. I come from 50 years in the past." He stopped and looked at me surprised, but, to my surprise, not as shocked as I expected. "I knew about time travel," he said with a smile, "but I'd never met anyone who did." "That's amazing." I felt a huge relief to hear that. Not only did he believe me, but he seemed fascinated. "We have been collecting information about the future to better understand how our actions in the present impact the world. But unfortunately, this must be one of my last visits. Soon we will have to search for other eras." He looked at me with a mixture of understanding and sadness. "I understand, but I'm glad we found each other, even for a brief moment." There was a silence between us, charged with unspoken emotions. Then he smiled, a smile full of tenderness and something deeper. "Maybe that's all the more reason to take advantage of every moment we have." And then, without thinking much, we approached and kissed. It was a soft kiss, full of promises and goodbyes. A moment that sealed all the emotions we had accumulated during that week. When we finally pulled away, he held my hand. "No matter how much time we have, what matters is what we do with it." I nodded, feeling my heart warmed by his words. That night, as I returned to the present, I knew that that trip had changed not only the story we were documenting, but also my life in a way I could never have imagined. I returned to the present in ecstasy, and that night it was impossible to sleep. I just thought about him, and couldn't get him out of my head. The intensity of our encounters, the connection we felt, was something I had never experienced before. I would have just one more trip to the future, and I was willing to commit madness because of that passion. He seriously thought about staying in the future and living there, leaving everything behind and plunging into that new world next to him. The idea was tempting, but I knew it was too risky. Staying in the future could jeopardize the entire project, putting years of research and dedication at risk. The next day, upon returning to the lab, my mind was still divided. The desire to see him again and the responsibility with the project struggled within me. But the decision was already made. I would make the last trip to the future. I prepared carefully, checking every detail of the equipment and the data I would need to collect. With the temporal helmet in hand, I took a deep breath and activated the machine. In an instant, I was back on the streets of the future. The futuristic landscape no longer seemed so alien to me, but still, my heart beat fast at the thought of meeting him again. I felt the excitement and apprehension wash over me as I walked the futuristic streets, absorbing every detail with a new perspective. More than collecting data, I wanted to enjoy every moment I had left in that time. And then, as if guided by instinct, I found myself in the same park where we met. He was there, sitting on the same bench, looking lost in thought. When he saw me, a smile lit up his face. "Hello, time traveler," he said, joking, but with a tenderness that warmed my heart. "Hello," I replied, sitting down next to him. "This may be my last visit." He nodded, as if he already knew. "Then let's make it count." We spent the day together, exploring the city, talking about the past, the present, and the future. Every moment was precious, and the desire to stay became stronger and stronger. In the late afternoon, when the sun began to set, he held my hand. "Stay here with me," he said, reading my thoughts. I smiled, tears in my eyes. "I'd like to, but the project, it's up to me." He told me I didn't need to go back. I could live with him. In an act of madness, I said I would stay, but on one condition. He would have to teach me everything about the future. He smiled, as if already waiting for this answer, and readily agreed. That afternoon, he took me to his house, a futuristic apartment with stunning views of the city. The technology around us was fascinating and a little intimidating. He began to show me how everything worked, from food to advanced transport systems. In the evening, when we finally found ourselves alone, all the accumulated tension exploded into a moment of intense passion. It was a meeting of bodies and souls, a celebration of our impulsive decision. Between kisses and caresses, he promised me that he would take care of me, that he would teach me everything I needed to know to live in that new world. And in that moment, I knew I had made the right choice. The next morning, I woke up with a mix of excitement and nervousness. While Peter left to sort out some things, I was left alone in his futuristic apartment. I began to explore the technological objects around me, marveling at the possibilities the future offered. However, while rummaging through his things, I found something that made my heart stop. It was a document with my name on it. "I was your mother." A wave of shock and despair hit me suddenly. How was that possible? How could I have made such a terrible mistake? She falls to her knees on the floor, dazed and confused. Feelings of shame and anguish flooded me. Everything I thought I knew had been turned upside down in an instant. I was in a future where my son had grown up, and I wasn't there to see him become who he was. How could I have done that? Desperate, I decided I needed to return to the present immediately. I couldn't go on there, living a life that wasn't mine, interfering in a future that didn't belong to me. Quickly, I activated the temporal helmet and returned to the lab. When I returned, I found everyone worried about me. I had been gone for hours, and my appearance and emotional state should be evident. Despite the questions and concerns, I couldn't tell anyone about what I found out. The shame and grief were too great to share. I promised myself that I would never make such an impulsive choice again. I learned the hard way that messing with time and fate had profound and unpredictable consequences. The experience left an indelible mark on me, a painful reminder that sometimes what seems like a desire can turn into an unbearable burden. I decided that I would no longer use the time machine after the harrowing experience in the future. 3 weeks later, however, I was surprised by even more shocking news. I was pregnant. The discovery was a whirlwind of emotions. Despite everything that had happened, life seemed to have its own plans. I felt torn between fear of the unknown and hope for a future I didn't expect. With my heart racing, I reflected on how to move forward. What did this mean for me and my life? How would this affect my decisions and choices going forward? I decided to face this new reality with courage and determination, even if the path ahead was uncertain. It was time to accept the present and the changes it brought, leaving behind the daredevil adventures of the past. But Peter would soon arrive. Thank you very much to those who have supported the channel financially through the link in the comment pinned. This helps me to bring more and more stories to you. And don't forget to like and also subscribe to continue receiving the new stories.